Picture says 1,000 words. If you've ever been in this situation, and maybe you're the one guy or gal who happens to have a PC, and you're like, all right, I'm trying to follow my class, they're using Photoshop on a Mac. Well, now is your opportunity. You can now access a Mac from any device that has a browser, HTML5 browser. And to give you a glimpse of what is in store for this webinar, we are going to start off with the Mac virtual desktops. Anthony will provide some background on the use cases and the needs that we've heard around this, as well as provide a demo. And then we'll switch over and talk about what is involved with getting set up, and in particular, how you can get set up very quickly to support your students who are learning remotely at these times. The third item is a discussion around how can you make virtual labs engaging. A physical, computer lab in campus allows students and instructors to talk. They can walk over and see each other's screens. And one of the questions you might have is, how do I do this in a virtual learning environment? And again, there we'll provide a demo of a virtual classroom, as well as how you can chat and collaborate and share screens. And lastly, we know there's a lot of question, people are asking, how do I pay for this? It's an unplanned expense. So we'll discuss some of the options and creative solutions we've seen universities take. All right, so the world turned upside down just a few short months ago. Prior to COVID, everybody, or at least many of you, were primarily on campus. Your students would drive to the computer lab, or they would go to maybe an active learning center, and they would collaborate in person. But now the picture looks a lot more like the one on the right. Your students are camped out at home. They're on the living room floor with devices and notebooks and whatnot. And the question is, how do we try to bring a lot of the best elements of a physical campus into the virtual world? All right, so who's who? We have our first presenter is Anthony Awida. He's the founder and CEO of Apporto. And Anthony has been at this for over 5 years and worked with over 100 different universities, many top universities, smaller universities around the world, a variety of different use cases. And he brings a wealth of both technical experience as well as deep kind of customer understanding. Myself, I'm Heather Wasserline. I'm the VP of Product here at Apporto, and I take heart in really trying to listen to the customers and use what I hear to drive our product roadmap. And last, but certainly not least, is Max Luchon. Max is our manager of customer success. He has managed computer labs at universities in the past and has a lot of empathy for the folks in our audience. He's also worked diligently, tirelessly to help a number of universities get set up really quickly during COVID to help their students work remotely. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to Anthony.
Thank you, Heather, for this great introduction. Thank you all for joining us here today. And Heather said good morning, good afternoon. I want to say also good evening. We have quite a few folks from the UK, from Ireland, and we have several people even from Australia. To those folks, I say good morning to you. And the first question probably is, why virtual Macs? So as you can imagine, we've been in this business now for 5 years, and during those 5 years, we've had many requests from customers for virtual Macs, but it's really all came to a head in May 2020 when we had our customer town hall. Every quarter, we typically hold a customer town hall where customers tell us about their requirements, their issues. And during that town hall, they told us that they absolutely needed virtual Mac desktops for the fall. In fact, 98% of them told us that they were planning to support remote learning. 50% of those planned to support or to offer remote access to Macs. And finally, the use cases they wanted to support was obviously graphic design, very common use for the Macs, and programming such as Xcode. Next slide, please. Obviously, delivering virtual desktops for the Mac is a bit of a challenge. The biggest challenge, quite candidly, is a licensing challenge. And Apple would allow us to deliver virtual Macs, virtual desktops on the Mac, provided they run on Apple hardware. That is a very specific requirement of running the Mac OS X operating system. So obviously on the back end, as you're gonna see in a minute, we're running on Apple hardware. It had to deliver a very good user experience. Obviously, a very key requirement of Mac virtual desktops is to use highly complex graphical applications. So it had to be, deliver a very good user experience even for those graphical applications. And finally, it had to be affordable. We could spend a lot of time engineering a product. If higher ed could not afford it, then obviously that was not a very good use of anybody's time. What we did not try to solve for this release are network latency problems. Obviously, that can be quite a challenge, and color precision. As you probably know, Macs deliver a higher color precision than PCs, but trying to take care of that problem would require a lot of engineering right now. So we put it out of the scope for now. Next slide, please. One of the challenges, previous slide, please, Heather. One of the challenges of higher ed is that computer lab usage is very, very variable. If you look at this chart, it depicts computer lab usage at one of our customers, New York University. And what you can see here is that at the end of the semester, there is a very high spike. And then the rest of the time, obviously, there are lulls. During the summer break, there's a lull. And what this means is that if we were to use a constant infrastructure, a constant size infrastructure all the time for a specific customer, it would be very, very expensive because it would have to be sized at this very high level. So in order to take care of this problem, in order to keep the costs somewhat reasonable, we had to introduce load orchestration. Next slide, please, Heather. So this is what our infrastructure looks like. At the foundation, obviously, we have Macs, as we discussed earlier. We have a layer that takes care of load balancing. Load balancer essentially is kind of a traffic cop, and it routes an incoming user to the right Mac. Active Directory is used to make sure that a user who logs into any Mac is able to log in. The SMB share enables us to deliver persistent profiles to a user. So if a user leaves files on his virtual desktop, if he's configured an application, he can come back and his files are still there, his configuration changes are still there. The streaming server enables us to transform Mac virtual desktops into HTML to deliver them in the browser. And finally, load orchestration. This is the layer of technology we're still working on, which enables us to essentially deliver a higher capacity to a customer when the customer needs it, and to relinquish that capacity and perhaps use some of it to another customer when the first customer no longer needs it. And with that, I'm gonna move to the demo. Heather, if you could make me the presenter, please.
Thank you, Anthony. Let me know when you are set up and I will make you the presenter.
I am set up and ready to go.
There you go.
Okay. So this use case, I am a student and I logged into Apporto using, a single sign-on or LDAP or any other mechanism. And now I'm presented with a bunch of applications, a bunch of virtual desktops. I have a Windows desktop here. I have a Linux desktop. I have a Mac desktop. Today, I want to work on my Mac desktop. I just hit launch. And now through the magic of HTML, I have a Mac virtual desktop that comes to my browser. And now I should be able to log in. And as I mentioned earlier, any files that I left during prior sessions are still there. As you can see here, we have this headshot that was left in a prior session is still there. And if you are looking at the screen and the screen is not rendering very, very well, as we've realized, GoToWebinar, which is the service we're using, drops a lot of frames when handling. I think now we have about 335 people attending the session. So if you're seeing a user experience that's not terrific, it's not the Mac Virtual Desktop, it's just perhaps GoToWebinar most likely. So this is Photoshop. Many of you guys are probably familiar with it. And this is the picture of our handsome manager of customer success, Max. But this is really his picture before COVID. Obviously, since COVID, he's grown a lot of hair. His beard has grown totally, completely differently than it looks right here. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna update Max's picture to look like what he should look like right now during COVID. So I'm fixing up his beard, his mustaches. And Max, is this more like what you look like right now?
Yep, you can extend my beard a little bit. It's about
Okay.
4 inches longer at this point.
All right. I think I'll spare the audience this side. Thank you. Though, all right. So there you can see. So obviously that's Photoshop. It runs very, very well. Another, application that I can use obviously is Microsoft Office. And if I wanted to use, for instance, Excel, I just hit Microsoft Excel and I just launched Microsoft Excel. And I get started here. I'm going to skip the sign in and start using Excel. Okay. And there is a worksheet. And obviously, I can do whatever I need to do here to start using Excel. This is the standard Excel user experience that you would expect on just about any Mac. And a couple of items that I want to show you is obviously we have this ribbon here. For those of you guys who are already Apporto users, you know that this ribbon enables you to interact with the virtual desktop. This icon enables me to make it full screen. This icon enables me to upload files from my physical desktop to the virtual desktop. And this icon enables me to download files from the virtual desktop to my physical desktop. And again, my physical desktop could just be about anything. It could be a PC, it could be a Mac, it could be a Chromebook, and I should be all set. And with that, I'm gonna pause. Heather, is there any questions that I need to handle right now before I exit the Mac Virtual Desktop, or at least this part of the Mac Virtual Desktop demo?
Yes, thank you for taking a pause. We do have a handful of questions. The first one comes from Ruben. He's asking, are there any licensing restrictions from Apple on accessing a Mac environment via a browser?
Not that we're aware of it. The Apple EULA states that Mac OS, and I think somebody asked that question, states that Mac OS must be run on Apple hardware, and this is what we're doing. We're not aware that there are any limitations that restrict from delivering an Apple UI through a browser.
Thank you.
Another question I can see is, does the account have admin access? For some accounts, as we do on Windows. For some accounts, we do provide admin access. For other accounts, we do not provide admin access. But in all cases, your admins, I should say, will have administrative access. So they will be able to deploy software and perhaps even using their favorite tool like Jamf to deploy the applications that they want to deploy.
Hey, thank you. Another question, we have a good question from Ray Martinez. Ray is asking, does the Mac have to be bound to Active Directory?
It does not have to be bound to your Active Directory. It has to be bound to our Active Directory, but that's totally transparent to you. It does not have to be bound to your Active Directory. In fact, for most of your users that will access this service using some kind of single sign-on, so that's how they would access this service.
Okay. A very popular question that we get, and I see that John Larson has asked, how is licensing for Adobe products handled?
Yes, and unfortunately, that's a minefield. And I mean, obviously, that's a question really that's for Adobe. What I can tell you is what our customers have done, at least on the Windows side. So as you know, Adobe offers device-based licensing and user-based licensing. And what they've done during COVID, they've offered those customers who have device-based licensing, user-based licensing for COVID. And our customers are able to take advantage of that to virtualize and deliver to their end users. I am told that there are some alternative vehicles. Presumably, Adobe now is offering some kind of concurrent licensing scheme, etc. But again, I think that's probably a better question to ask Adobe. If you're a customer of ours and you need our help, we're happy to have a conversation with you and with Adobe on this matter.
Okay. And here's another good technical question from Lincoln Slade. Do you run multiple VMs per device, or is it more of a one-to-one deployment?
That's a very good question. And the answer is it's multiple. It really depends on the application, the target use, the use case. But we typically will try to deliver multiple users per device in order to keep the cost affordable. If you try to subscribe to a service that delivers one device per user, you will see that the cost is very, very high. So multi-user, and again, we properly size those devices for the applications that will be used on those devices to make sure that for one, the performance is good, for two, higher ed can afford it.
Thank you. Maybe one last set of questions, and then what we'll do for anybody whose question we did not get to, we have several of our team in the audience, and we will be responding to you in the chat box, as well as anything we might not, if we don't get to everybody in the webinar, we will follow up by email afterwards. But Anthony, here's another set of questions. A lot of folks are asking about frame rates, latency, and how this might work with video and audio editing.
Yes, so network latency is the most important consideration that you should keep in mind when delivering any type of virtual desktops. And bandwidth in our experience does not tend to be a problem. I think if you do a little bit of calculation, you will see that for most applications like Photoshop or 3D type application, you will need anywhere between 1 megabit per second and 5 megabits per second. So for most end users, this should be fine. Network latency will be important. Network latency, again, will vary based on the use case. If you have a student who's typing a Microsoft Word document or doing Microsoft Excel, even 100 millisecond latency will be fine. If you're doing something like Adobe Photoshop and the like, you probably will need to stay around 60 milliseconds or less. For video editing, I have here a network latency of 20-25 milliseconds. And video editing, I tried Premiere and it appears like it's running fine for me. But again, I'm not a professional video editing expert. So I think it'll be very important to test it out. And the other thing that will be important is that we will try to set you up to the extent possible with a data center that is closest to your physical location, to the physical location of your campus or your students. And therefore, this will enable us to deliver the lowest network latency possible to your end users.
Okay, thank you. You know, I see two more sets of questions that may be good to address right off the bat. People are asking about the hardware on the back end and the operating system.
So we offer options when it comes to operating system. We offer Catalina, we offer Mojave. If you really want us to deliver an earlier version of the Mac operating system, we can do that. On the back end, right now we're using Mac Minis and Mac Pros, and that's what we're using on the back end.
Thank you. And then in terms of software, what types of programs can you run? Can you run things like Xcode and Autodesk tools? And can users install third-party software?
Again, and the answer to the first set of questions is yes. You should be able. For 80 to 90% of our customers, we provide them with virtual desktops where the students, the users, do not have administrative privileges. For another 10-15%, we do provide virtual desktops where the end user, the student, may have administrative privileges. This is what we plan to do here. As you can imagine, providing students with an account or with a virtual desktop where they have admin privileges is always more problematic, has more headaches associated with it than otherwise. But it's all available, and you can subscribe to either.
Alrighty.
Okay.
This may be a good time.
I think we
to
should give
over.
time. Yes, to Max.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So I'll bring the presentation back up and we will turn it over to Max. One moment here. Alrighty. Okay, Max, let me know when you can see my screen and you are welcome to take it away.
Great, yeah, we're good to go. You can go ahead and get to the next, yeah, perfect. Thank you, Anthony and Heather. Hello, everyone. I speak with numerous universities on a daily basis, and having worked in higher ed myself, I have now been on both sides of the coin, both as an engineer and as a customer. Now I help higher ed institutions utilize the cloud for solving numerous problems or simply delivering more services to their students and faculty. I have to stress the importance of planning ahead. We are living in uncertain times. We simply do not know what we do not know. And so this experience and current situation is new to all of us. We at Apporto are also learning how to adapt so we can better service you all. Because most higher ed institutions plan to either partially or fully support remote learning in the fall, careful planning is required to best deliver a good experience. When considering planning for virtual Mac delivery, it is really important to take into account that it is simply easier and significantly faster for us to add Windows or Linux capacity on the fly. So what that means is that if you told me that you needed to add more concurrent users to your Apporto environment, we could scale up your resources really quickly and seamlessly without downtime. However, because virtual Macs are in high demand right now, I must again stress the importance of planning ahead. Try to think about how many users you need to have access to your Mac environment and which apps they need to have access to. Knowing this information sooner means that you can place your request in sooner and we'll be able to deliver the environment on a timely basis. Next slide, please. I wanted to take the time to talk about determining requirements. It is really important that you determine your requirements for the fall. Think of your goals. For example, what environments do you need to provide access to for your students and faculty? What courses are being taught, and which platforms and applications are required for users? Have a conversation with your faculty. Provide them with your knowledge and experience. If their requirements cannot be met, provide advice on what is possible and what isn't, so that they can plan accordingly as well. Remember that the success of your faculty and students is correlated to your success as engineers, admins, management, and leadership. If you have any initiatives for the bring your own device model, or even if you don't, this is a great time to kickstart that offering to your students. BYOD can be pretty hard. How do we deliver applications or desktop environments to our students but avoid a help desk nightmare? Apporto does not require a client to be installed on any computer or tablet accessing the Apporto environment. So this is your chance to become IT superheroes. You can extend the life of your loaner laptops since all of the compute power is in the cloud and not on the client PC accessing the Apporto cloud. With Apporto, your Mac users could already use PC-only apps on their Macs, and now we can say vice versa. PC users can finally access Mac software in the same way. Next slide, please. I wanted to go over our quick implementation plan. The implementation process is fairly simple and quick if the simple steps are carefully coordinated and planned. My team can deliver your implementation and ensure that it is successful when we follow this outline. First, we will have a quick kickoff meeting. It is important that any available technical staff attends this meeting so that internal engineering teams on your side are aware of the project and what some of the requirements are. It's important to establish communication with your IT folks to keep everyone on the same page to have things move smoothly. This meeting will also feature a Q&A session to ensure that all the questions are answered. We will also determine whether or not a site-to-site tunnel is required. This is generally for accessing your license servers, print servers, or any file servers that you want to have be available in the Apporto environment. Alternatively, we can also host a license server for your apps in the cloud. We will discuss single sign-on methods and features such as ADFS, Azure AD, Shibboleth, CAS, or LDAP. We will quickly discuss the bird's eye view plan, what kind of image you want to deploy, set of apps, etc. We then put our engineers to work hard in getting these apps configured. Alternatively, you may have admin access should you choose to install the apps yourself. We then will scale out your infrastructure to fit the number of concurrent users you have. This typically takes up to a day. And then after final testing, my team will provide you with admin portal training as well as answer any other questions you might have. And under normal circumstances, it's best if we allow 5 to 10 business days for smooth delivery. On the next slide, we will discuss how to make virtual labs more engaging, and back to you, Anthony.
Thank you very much, Max. And so next slide, please, Heather.
Okay.
So obviously, we've been working with, customers, higher ed customers for the last 5 years now, and we've learned a lot through this process. One thing we've learned through this process is that obviously students go to the computer labs to access software, perhaps even to access hardware. If they need a more powerful computer than they have with them on their laptop. But there's other reasons why students go to the computer lab. And I think you probably see that when you see students headed to the computer lab and they may have their own laptop, and instead of using the computer that's available there, they move that computer that you provided to them at great expense, they plop their laptop and they start using it. The reason they go there, when we interviewed them, they told us is they go there because they want the social interaction that can take place in a computer lab. They may have questions, and maybe they can have one of their classmates in the lab and interact with that classmate of theirs, and do engage in collaborative learning or classroom learning. So we at Apporto, we wanted to make sure that those elements are available even in the virtual computer lab. So really our vision is that a virtual computer lab is more than just a bunch of virtual computers. It has a social element to it. It has a collaborative element to it. Next slide, please, Heather. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to my demo screen here. Heather, if you could make me the presenter, please. Okay, and now I am gonna launch this time the Windows desktop. And what the part that I wanna show you this time is less about the technology and more about the social capabilities of our service. So as you can see here, this is the regular Windows desktop with the applications like Photoshop and AutoCAD and SolidWorks. But what I also have here, I have a messenger, and it is built in to our technology. And as you can see in this messenger, I have two classmates of mine that are part of the class Math 101. I have Max and I have Heather who are online. And even though I may be 100 miles from Max because during COVID, nobody's close to each other, I can say to Max, hey Max, is this a good time to work? Sorry. Hey Max, is this a good time to work together on the assignment? And if Max says yes, then I can share screens with him. I can share files with him. We can collaborate together on the joint assignment. There is one more feature that I want to show you that is accessible only to faculty. And this is a feature we call the virtual classroom. If I click on this icon right here, that again, only faculty have access to, I will be entering a virtual classroom. And as you can see right here, there's only one person in this virtual classroom. It is Max, and Max is doing some work. And I can keep an eye, if I had declared that, for instance, on Wednesdays, between the hours of 2 and 3, I have lab hours, or maybe my TA will be there. I can therefore keep an eye now on Max and Heather and see that, for instance, Heather is doing the wrong thing with her model. So I can chat with her and I can tell her, can I show you how to get it done? And if she says yes, I can assume control of her screen. And now I can take over from Heather and show her how to properly rotate this object. By the way, Heather is a mechanical engineer, so I think in truth, she could show me quite a few tricks in this one. So anyway, as you can see here, this is the other aspect of our software that we wanted to share with you, is that not only we deliver virtual desktops to your users, to your students, we deliver abilities to keep your students engaged. And let me spend a little bit of time on that. One of the things we learned in remote learning is that the biggest risk with remote learning is that students get unengaged and students get drop off. And the reason they get disengaged is that they're missing the social aspect. They're lonely, they're alone, or if they hit perhaps a speed bump, they're not able to overcome it. So what we wanted to deliver, even in remote learning environment, is this social capability, the screen sharing capability, this teacher keeping an eye on the student and helping them move along if they need help and not get stuck and unengaged and drop out or drop off from the course. And with that, I'm gonna hand over back to you, Heather.
All right, thank you for the demo. So do you want to pause for any questions before?
Sure.
Okay. So one moment, I'm looking at the list of questions. So there's a question regarding collaboration features, and are they available yet on the Mac OS?
Yes, they are available on the Mac OS. I mean, that layer of technology is essentially our streaming technology. So whatever worked on the Windows virtual desktop, whatever worked on the Linux virtual desktop works also on the Mac virtual desktop.
Okay. Since we have a global audience, we're getting questions about, can I connect to an Apporto workstation if I am in China? Is the performance still good?
Yeah, so obviously, yes and no, in the sense that we are limited to the extent that we have to find an infrastructure provider that's geographically close to our customers, again, to minimize that network latency that we talked about. The infrastructure providers we work with right now have data centers on the West Coast, on the East Coast of the United States, in several cities in Europe. I don't remember off the top of my head if they have data centers in China or in Asia in particular, but we can get back to you on that question.
Okay, and is that answer specific to the Mac data centers? AWS
Yes.
and Azure are global, right?
Yes. If you're looking for Windows or Linux virtual desktops, obviously we can deliver those just about anywhere because we leverage the infrastructure of the big two providers. But for the Mac virtual desktops, we use another party, and that party obviously has more limited availability for the Mac hardware.
A related topic, I see several questions about where is data stored, data security, and specifically for file storage, like can customers use their own SMB share, for example?
That's a really good question. And to be candid, probably in this initial release, I'm not sure I mean, on the Windows side, obviously, for all of those who are customers of ours, you do know that we enable you to mount an SMB share of yours to the virtual desktop and enable your students to access it. I don't think in this very initial release, we're going to have that capability, but obviously it is on the roadmap and it's something we are working on delivering.
Along those lines, maybe you can speak to what is in scope for this initial release versus what is coming in the future.
So this initial release, we're focusing on delivering what I would call mediums level graphical applications, things like Photoshop and those type of applications. The next part of this is that we want to enable higher compression technology to be able to deliver a great user application for very highly demanding applications like video editing or sound editing. So that's the current roadmap for the Mac virtual desktop.
Okay. We have a general question about, is this cloud-based? And maybe because we didn't address this earlier, we should say, yes, this is cloud-based. We're a cloud-native virtual desktop as a service. And Anthony, maybe you can speak to the fact that we're multi-cloud.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're multi-cloud, and this has proven to be a very important feature of our service. As you may know, some of you who've interacted with Azure for the last 3 months, they had run out of specific servers, so we've used AWS for those servers, and vice versa. Obviously, none of them offers, Mac to deliver from the cloud, so we use a third infrastructure provider. So we're obviously multi-cloud. We're cloud native. Everything we do is delivered through the browser, in the browser, because quite candidly, we're seeing a larger and larger incoming population of students who come with Chromebooks, who come with iPads. We get fielded a lot of questions from end users who are using even smartphones. They may be at work, they want to do something really quickly, they log in using their smartphone, and they take care of that item. So we're seeing a lot of unconventional devices using our service. So it's very important that we deliver all of that in the browser.
Hey, thank you. So going back to the Mac desktop, we're getting several questions specific to audio, and maybe in particular, people are curious if we can play audio, and then if it's possible to edit audio.
You should be able to play audio. In terms of editing audio, again, I think the one thing to keep in mind is this network latency that we talked about earlier. So I think provided you have very good network latency or low network latency, it should be possible to edit audio as well. But I think this part will need, some more testing.
Okay. Lastly, can you speak to the student experience of a student who may have one class where they need to use a Windows desktop and another class where they may need to use a Mac or even a Linux desktop? Can they access their same, all of their files?
Excellent question. So right now, if you access, let's say you start with your Windows desktop, and now you have a set of files there. You launch your Linux desktop, you will have access to those files. This is part of the work that our colleague Daniel Hutchison, who's on this call, has put together. For this initial release of the Mac will not share the profile with Windows and Linux. So if they want to access the same set of files, maybe they want to use something like a Google Drive or OneDrive or download it to their physical desktop. Clearly, on our roadmap, we want to enable the same technology we're using on Linux on the Mac, so that all of these profiles are essentially one profile, and any file that has been, say, created or edited on any of those virtual desktops is accessible from the other virtual desktops. But this initial release, this is not supported in this initial release.
We have a handful of questions about the classrooms. People are asking, how are the classrooms set up? Does the faculty need to invite all of their students, or is this integrated?
So there's a number of ways that this can be done. Some of our very large customers, like Southern New Hampshire University, use, believe it or not, a CSV to export the data from their student information system and to import it into our service. Some others may have attributes in their single sign-on, and through the use of those attributes, we can associate roles, we can associate, we can associate even classes. We also have a integration with Canvas that is in beta right now, and that's another way where we can transfer all of this contextual information that will enable a user, that will enable a student to log in from Canvas and carry over what classes he's taking, who's the faculty for this class, who are the classmates in this class.
Thank you. So 2 more questions that I think would be useful for the broader audience. We have a question about analytics. What metrics are available for faculty members?
We have a very rich set of analytics, and for faculty, for administrators, we have analytics that help you answer how many user sessions did you serve, what are the most popular applications and desktops, what are the usage patterns. If faculty, on the other hand, can gain insight into questions such as, let me move to a more meaningful session here. For instance, here as a faculty teaching Math 101, I can see how much time the 25th percentile, the 50th percentile, and the 75th percentile cohorts have spent on the virtual desktop. And I can, for instance, see how much time has Amber spent, and how does that compare to her cohorts. So as you can see here, Amber has spent very little time compared to the median, compared to the 25th percentile, to the 50th percentile, to the 75th percentile. And I can gain insight into that and perhaps advise Amber on what she needs to do.
Thank you. So the last set of questions before we transition back to the slides, there's a group of questions around privacy, security, and accessibility. Specifically, are we HIPAA and FERPA compliant? And are our menu ribbon icons accessible?
Yes, so obviously accessibility is very important to us. It's very important to each and every customer of ours. And we do supply our customers who ask for it a VPAT. And with every release, we check for compliance. So that is taken care of. All of our customers, we have 100 universities as customers. And obviously all of our customers are concerned about FERPA. So we've taken all the measures that are required to comply with FERPA. And if you happen to be based in Canada or in the UK, where you have data residency requirements, we also comply with those. In terms of HIPAA, for specific customers, for specific use cases, we have signed a business associate agreement that gives our customers the comfort that they need for HIPAA type data. So we have done that as well.
Alrighty, thank you for fielding a lot of questions. We still have dozens more. So will I switch back to the presentation and allow Anthony to speak to the budgeting and payment, that side of things. I will be reviewing your questions and try to group them so that we can address as many as possible in the Q&A. And again, if we don't get to anyone's question, specific one, we will follow up by email after this presentation. So Anthony,
okay, so Heather, in the interest of time, just I can, if you're seeing my screen, and you should be seeing my screen, I'll walk you through this presentation. So probably many of you guys are wondering, okay, this, hopefully you're thinking to yourself, this looks great. Now, how do I pay for this? And what I want to share with you are the insights that we've learned from our customers, from you, as to how possibly one can pay for this. Heather, if you could make me the presenter again. So we have developed this calculator that enables you to, on the one hand, understand the costs of your existing computer labs, how you may be able to save some money during COVID, or at other times other than COVID, and perhaps what is the cost associated with the Apporto Virtual Computer Lab. So this is a theoretical a campus where we have 1,000 computers in the lab. The average cost of each computer is $1,300. The depreciation cycle of computers in years is 4. Number of students who use those computer lab is 2,000. Obviously, you can change those numbers to suit your campus profile. So what many of our customers have done before COVID, when they implement a BYO type approach, is they are able now to defer the refresh cycle of their computers. The reason they're able to do that is that when you move to a virtual computer lab environment, the heavy processing of the app required by the applications now is done in the cloud. And essentially the computers that you have in your computer labs, or at least some of them, act as thin clients. And therefore, instead of refreshing and replacing your computers in all of your computer labs to the latest and greatest model, instead of updating the GPUs to the latest and greatest model, if you postpone, if you defer that event by 1 year, this would translate into savings of $325,000. You know, some of our customers during COVID are being asked to forego the computer lab space, and the reason they're being asked to do that is because the classes have to be smaller, and if the classes are smaller, that means that they're going to need more space for classrooms, and some of that space is coming from the computer labs. And therefore, again, this is perhaps an area where the IT department is being charged less for the real estate costs because they're using less computer lab space. IT labor savings, obviously, if you're doing all the work in the cloud where everything is centralized, you have to do less work on the individual desktops, so you can save some money there. And finally, hardware repair and security, you can save some money there. But the bottom line is, if you add all of those up, you can add up to savings of $527,000 a year for this campus profile, for the ethical campus profile. Assuming that you wanna essentially power up to 20% of the physical desktops in your computer labs from the cloud, this would be the corresponding Apporto cost. So as you can see, even though you're making an investment here, it is a small investment compared to the savings that you would be able to achieve by moving some of your computer labs to the cloud. And perhaps the most important piece, and this is the piece that we used to emphasize before COVID, is the increased student productivity. If a student can gain an extra half an hour a week because they no longer have to drive to the computer lab, because they no longer have to find a parking spot to access the computer lab or wait in line to access the computer lab, if we save those students half an hour a week, this would translate into a productivity enhancement to the student worth $1.7 million. So clearly there are multiplier effects here. If you make the students more productive, which is really what the computer labs are all about, there is a tremendous payoff, there is a tremendous benefit, in addition to the hard dollar savings you can achieve by moving your computer lab to the cloud. I'm done, Heather.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So I've got a group of questions, and I see that we have about 5 minutes remaining, and maybe we'll be able to stay on board an extra 5 or so minutes. So I'm going to prioritize these. First question is, will we make this spreadsheet available, for example, on our website?
Yes, for sure. In fact, it's already available, but for those people who have attended, we will add a link so you can download it from there.
Okay, perfect. Another set of questions, are the virtual Macs available now?
Yes, we have a beta that starting tomorrow, and we invited a subset of customers, our existing customers, to try out the beta. And if you are interested in participating in the beta, please contact us. There is a contact form, and contact us and let us know of your interest in the beta, the use case you envision using it for, and we will get back to you.
Yeah, actually, I'll put the email. So for all of us at Apporto, our emails are our first name at apporto.com, and our primary marketing contact is Julia. So and you can email me directly as well. If you're interested in participating in the beta, the Mac beta, actually the best person to email is myself, Heather at apporto.com. If you have questions generally about Apporto, please email Julia. And going back to the set of questions, Anthony, a related question is, so for people who are not an existing Apporto customer, is there a way for them to do a proof of concept for maybe
Yes.
like 30 days? Yeah.
Yes, of course, of course. Please reach out to Heather and she will organize all of that.
Okay. People mentioned that there's a lead time. How far in advance should somebody plan if they wanted to have a virtual lab set up in the fall? And maybe you can speak to both the Windows side of things as well as Macs.
So I think Max really provided a very good answer for the Windows, for Linux. This is something we've been doing for a good number of years. So we have a lot of experience with that. So I think to be on the safe side, from the time you give us your order, your purchase order, or you sign the contract with us, it'll take anywhere between 5 to 10 working days to have your Windows and or Linux environment up and running. For the Mac side, we really encourage you to reach out to us as soon as you can so we can plan ahead. As you can imagine, the Mac infrastructure providers are very different from the Windows and Linux infrastructure providers. It's a different size. It's a different lead time to order additional Mac Minis or Mac Pros to mount them on a rack between quotes. So the earliest you can give us the heads up, the earliest we can work together on this, the better off everybody is. But really, our objective is to help as many customers as we can for the fall semester, because we do understand that this is the deadline for most of our customers or our prospects.
And we have a question. I think you'll like this one, Anthony. One or two people have asked, are these Macs in a data center, or can we potentially use existing hardware on campus?
That's a really good question. And everything we're putting together is to enable us at some point in time to ship to our customers a blade with a stack of technology on there that we have delivered. And perhaps at that point in time, we can manage the blade. You can manage some of the infrastructure that you have already in place. We can integrate them together, but that's a few months out. Let's be candid about it. That's not going to happen before the fall. So it is in our roadmap. It is something that obviously we're very interested. Our customers have expressed interest in it, but it'll take more time to set it up.
Okay, thank you. There are several questions about the process. So say a university worked with us to set up a Mac virtual lab. How would they go about getting the software that they want installed?
So when we perhaps Max can answer this question, but essentially just like as we do right now on the Windows side, when we sign a new customer, Max or somebody on his team will work with you to come up with a list of the applications you want delivered, and for then you or Max or somebody on his team will work to either installing the software, or you will be given admin rights to the servers where you can deploy the software yourself, either by installing the software or using some kind of automation like Jamf.
Okay. Great. The last two sets of questions come in two sort of broad categories. The one that's probably on everyone's mind that I'll pose first is regarding cost and pricing. And Anthony, yeah, maybe you can speak to this both from the Windows side as well as Macs. And
so we're finalizing our pricing as we speak. We're sharpening our pencils. We're squeezing as much as we can out of the technology. And what I can tell you is that we expect the pricing to be about 150%, between 150% to 200% of our Windows pricing. Our Windows pricing, all of our customers find it very, very attractive because it's based on the number of concurrent users versus being based on the number of named users. Obviously, the Mac pricing is more expensive than the Windows pricing because unlike Windows, we have to run on Apple hardware, which, as you probably already know, is more expensive than Windows hardware. So that's really the difference there. But the pricing, will be finalized in the next 2 weeks as we go production.
And is pricing user-based or based on the number of devices?
It's based on the number of seats or based on the number of concurrent users.
Okay, thank you. Lastly, so there's a wide variety of questions that are pretty specific about the capabilities for Mac desktops. And these, I think what we will do is follow up one by one via email. But Anthony, if you want to address a few of these, there are questions about keyboard shortcuts. Will folks be able to use those? Can they access a USB or their camera on their laptop?
Yeah, I'll answer a couple of those, but I think in fairness to the people who are leaving, perhaps we should answer those questions and send a summary of the questions and the answers. When it comes to keyboard mapping, obviously we're going to implement keyboard mapping, but you should keep in mind that there are some keyboard shortcuts that trigger in action in the browser. Like if I remember correctly, Control T may create a new tab in the browser, so the browser will capture that Control key before it gets to the Mac Virtual Desktop. So there are some limitations there that you should be aware of.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. And I know we are at the top of the hour. So for everyone still on the call, I will be following up with an email most likely tomorrow morning once we have the recording of this webinar. And I will provide a link to our pricing, the budgeting spreadsheet that Anthony shared, as well as we will be following up with you individually regarding any questions. So at this time, I want to just extend a sincere thank you for all of you taking the time to, listen. Many of you have stayed throughout the entirety of this. Thank you, Anthony and Max, for sharing your experiences and insights. We hope you all are doing well and staying safe at these times. And if you have any additional questions for us, please feel free to reach out. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you all. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, everyone.